I was going to ask you if it's okay about Iran, because Iran figures into so many of our discussions politically now. It's in the paper every single day. I like teaching about Iran, not just because of the Islamic Revolution, but because of the U.S. involvement with Mossadegh and Operation Ajax and then the Shah and sort of the blowback from that. And so I sort of would like to know, if you could tell high school teachers anything about current Iran or what you think about Iran going forward as the main Shia nation that it is. I'd be interested in what you have to say.
Well, it's as you know, I've been teaching it. It's a complicated story, but here comes a brief answer.
Okay.
The Iranian Revolution, the people in general became more and more opposed to the Shah, not when he started modernizing, but when he started changing things in such a way that in a very brief period, people started leaving villages and started coming to big cities, and huge construction projects began. By the time Shah was deposed, Iran was importing more than 70% of its food. Okay? So the disruption in the society had been phenomenal. The second thing that he started doing, which was not done before, traditionally in the Shia Islam, the people give their zakat and actually the tenth.
Ooh.
What was that?
Your power.
Hello.
You're still on?
It's okay.
Okay.
I'm alive.
Okay, well, we're good.
So they give the money to the Iranian, because they do have a structure, which the Sunnis don't have. So the money is given to the clergy. And in fact, the bigger they are, like Ayatollahs and so on, they have a tremendous amount of money under their control, which they then spend, and historically have actually done a very good job. And the Shah tried to take that money away from them so, quote, the state can spend it better. The third thing that is important to realize, that Khomeini's father was killed by the Shah's father, and Khomeini never forgot that. The fourth thing to keep in mind is when, and I forget the actual year, there was an American military person who had killed an Iranian. And according to the agreements between the US and Iran that goes back to Mossadegh's time, does anybody remember Mossadegh?
Is that his name? It's not Mohammed Mossadegh.
It is Muhammad Mossadegh.
Mossadegh.
Yes. Well, actually it goes after Mossadegh was removed and the Shah was brought back in. The agreements that were signed were almost identical to the way they are with Iraq, which Iraq doesn't want to agree to now to perpetuate, which was whatever the Americans do, they cannot be tried in the local courts because they are subject only to the American law. And that is what happened in that case, and Khomeini said that is unacceptable because it actually is the loss of our dignity and our independence. So when he started getting loud, we told the Shah to expel him, and he went to Iraq. Then we asked Iraq to expel him. So he went to Paris. And wouldn't you believe it, in Paris, he was joined by an American educated guy named Qutbzadeh. Qutbzadeh was an undergraduate in Georgetown when I was doing my PhD. And the Iranian government hated him because he used to play pranks on them. That's another interesting story. So he goes there and he knew how the Western press works. So he would create every day situations where Khomeini would be in the news. So every day, something or another about Khomeini was being not only distributed in the world press, but also in Iran. He would tape a message, send it over telephone to 10 people, and they would send it to others. They would make copies, and it would be distributed.
So it's always been very interesting to me that the U.S. Embassy takeover and then the revolution itself initially was not led by Khomeini, that he appropriated it.
I'm going to come to that.
Right.
Because the important thing is what made Khomeini the way he was, or we even become known. So he becomes known because of a series of blunders we make, and we actually keep on doing this with others, because we don't learn. I mean, that's what we are doing with Osama. He became popular because we kept on telling people, he hates us. He says, oh, good, then we like him. Of course, now he's discredited. The actual work in the streets that was going on was work by communists. And they are the ones who are now known as Mujahideen Khalq. Mujahideen Khalq. Mujahideen Khalq. The Mujahideen of people's religious fighters, communists. Okay, so the Mujahideen is used by everybody because it's what people can relate to. These guys were communists. They are now in southern Iraq, so you know that we are still running the communist Mujahideen Khalq out of our control Iraq against Iran. But then Khomeini decides to go. And there was an assumption that the military will stop him from landing, and they didn't.
Whose assumption? The communists?
Everybody's assumption was. The communists actually thought that if there is a revolution, they will be in power. Well, it never happened, because when Khomeini came and the military let him come, and the people came out in the streets, because the people fundamentally are religious, if it actually had been a bloody revolution, the communists would have won, because they would have taken over. Being a grassroots, because this is what I call the first grassroots revolution that I can remember. Because here this guy comes in, there is no fighting. The military says, we're not going to stop you, and he comes in.
What had happened to the Tudeh party? Had this Shah exterminated?
Tudeh party was not exterminated, but it had been sidelined because they were ineffective. I mean, just like the Wafd party in Egypt.
But in the 30s and 40s, they were quite...
Oh, they were big. This is how Mossadegh came to power.
So it's an offshoot of the Tudeh.
Who?
I'm talking about
The Mujahideen Khalq?
Yes.
No, because Tudeh
was secular.
they were all seculars. I mean, this religious stuff comes more recently. They were all secular in modern parties. But they were not communists. They were
Tudeh was not.
No. They were nationalists, but they're not. If you remember Wafd party in Egypt, same thing. I mean, Wafd party was very big in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
But they were very strong pro-labor, Tudeh.
Almost all of them started out as pro-labor because labor is poor. Okay, because they all start out as, representing the poor and the labor. It's almost always the labor. Anyways, the takeover of the embassy is an episode that happened independent of Khomeini. And the people who, quote, the students who took over, the leadership now is considered to be good guys by the Americans, because they have all said, we shouldn't have done it, blah, 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 we are sorry, and we are now Democrats. What Khomeini did is he took advantage of it, because he could have stopped it. And so he must have said to himself, I'm now trying to imagine what Khomeini was thinking, but I have no idea, but it sounds logical. That's now scientist talking, I think, rather than a theologian. See?
Well, and that's interesting because now there was this whole recent crisis around the possibility that that what's his face, you know, the current leader of Iran, huh?
No.
Ahmadinejad. Thank
Yes,
you, everyone.
yes.
That Ahmadinejad's photo was there as one of the photos who were hostage takers. Though
But that has
now
been, no, but that has been proven wrong.
I understand, but I'm not interested. I mean, I believe it's wrong.
Yeah.
But what was interesting to me was not whether or not he was one of the hostage takers. What was interesting to me was the spin around it.
Exactly.
Right, and
Exactly.
like how this was all of a sudden this huge issue because
Exactly.
Ahmadinejad's not scary anyway. Right.
Yeah.
What's scary is that he was a hostage taker in '79.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think we've got our
Yeah.
priorities
Yeah.
a little mixed
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah. No, and the thing is that the rhetoric that the students used, and you know the demonstrations outside are very interesting. Those of you who may have read the written reports rather than the pictures, you know, forget about ABC's the
Countdown.
Nightline, you
Day
know,
396.
and counting, yeah, it was like this. You know, one of these guys today is counting, you know, how many days after mission accomplished. Who's the guy who's doing?
Jon Stewart.
Huh?
Is Jon Stewart keeping track?
No.
Colbert.
No, he's on MSNBC.
Oh,
Keith
Keith
Olbermann.
Olbermann.
Keith Olbermann. Yeah. So you know, you know what his name from ABC became famous. Ted Koppel,
That's right.
by doing this thing, you know, so many days and so on after that. Those demonstrations, those of you who have actually been reading the contemporary stories when they were happening, some of you are not old enough to actually have seen it, they used to gather because the cameras would come. You know, the cameras would come, hey, you know, and the thing would happen. So they were all staged for the cameras. And the English translations of the words they were saying, you know, death to America, okay? Which actually in Farsi says, you know, America Murdabad, but Murdabad simply is the opposite of Zindabad, which is like long live the king when the king dies, right? So it really has only slogan meanings and no physical implications. In any case, but Khomeini took advantage of it and he kept it because that way he could consolidate his power faster without having to deal quickly with any of the problems, and there were lots of them.
And Maleki, I guess,
Did I
Yeah.
put it in a different perspective, or
Well,
you knew all of that stuff?
Yeah, but it's to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah.
I